Hello, everyone. I am, as always, super excited about today's session. And the word in our title that I am most excited about is that word comprehensive. As you know, if you have been on a webinar with Double the Donation before, we are always talking about workplace fundraising and corporate partnerships, but often we focus on one singular topic. Maybe we're talking about employer matching gifts specifically or in-kind gifts. And often when I speak to nonprofit professionals themselves, they're a little bit that same way. They have a passion for workplace volunteering or a passion for sourcing donations for their gala type thing. But I really think there's a ton of value with taking that step back and looking at all the various ways that we can interact with companies and corporate entities to benefit your mission. So I am thrilled to have Mark Marshall, Chief Strategy Officer at BWF, here with me today. And if you all don't know BWF already, they help nonprofits drive impactful change by providing expert strategies in fundraising, technology solutions, donor engagement, and operations to support their missions and maximize philanthropic outcomes. And if we have yet to meet, my name is Colleen Carroll. I'm the Community and Events Lead here at Double the Donation. And Double the Donation helps nonprofits and schools boost fundraising by simplifying access to matching gift and workplace giving programs through a comprehensive database and seamless platform integrations. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea as to why this is a topic that Mark and I are really thrilled to be speaking about with you today. Mark, before we jump in, anything else you'd add?
No, great. This is an important spot, is really developing a strategy for each of your giving opportunities, and excited to be here with you today. So look forward to a good conversation.
Fantastic. And I see we have some people already saying hello in the chat. It is awesome to be here with you all today. Feel free to say where you're calling in from. If you want to say what the weather's like, I'm always a little bit nosy, and definitely drop things in the chat. I'll also say, feel free to drop questions in the chat or the questions tab. We'll have an official Q&A section at the end, but we'll also try to sprinkle in some throughout. All right, let's dig right into this and talk about why corporate partnerships are so valuable. Again, I hope you already have a little bit of a taste of this because you're logged on today, but I do recognize that if you're a fundraiser, you probably have a lot of topics that feel incredibly valuable. So let's dig into that now. And Mark, I'm actually going to pass it over to you to start talking about that Giving USA report.
Great. Well, Giving USA serves as a great way for us to get a good snapshot of what's happening in American philanthropy. And certainly, of the $592 billion given last year, 6.3% of that came from corporate and foundation dollars specifically. And those are, as we look at those corporate dollars, we know that they're gonna grow. They outpaced inflation. But we want to make sure, as you're thinking about what's the role corporate philanthropy needs to play with your program, and this gives you an idea, thinking about what's the scale it should be for your giving program, and how do you make sure that it actually will mean something to your corporate donors, but also to you as an entity. Some things to think about as you're looking at partnerships, and when Colleen and I were talking about this, we really wanted to think about what they need to look like. And one of the things we're hearing consistently from corporations is they don't want a one-off engagement. They really want a comprehensive approach. They want to have a bit of a relationship, and there's lots of opportunity. And you're going to find, there's a great list of ways people can be connected. Whether they're looking for their team to be engaged, sometimes they're actually putting a volunteer on your board. That's a great opportunity for some places. They're also looking at ways to really think about product that they like to donate their product. It's part of how they exist in the world. But we really need to be looking at all the different ways they can participate and really building a comprehensive approach to the ways that are appropriate for your organization and how you might interact with your corporate partners. Some of the things as we think about the in-kind gifts is really thinking about the tendency is to think about the goods or services. Are they giving goods that they're producing? We've seen organizations where they donate their factory seconds to third world places around clothing. Other places are giving away product that they have, whether they produce paper and are donating it to schools. But really thinking about what are those different types of goods that organizations might need. I would point out, you want to make sure they're meaningful to the nonprofit. In particular, for example, CASE came out with some rulings as their donor count around donations of software. A lot of software donations would never be fully recognized or utilized, but we want to make sure they mean something to the organization and are a way to be impactful. But they can also play a real key role in reducing the operating costs of the nonprofit, and we've seen that in a lot of different ways. So really some things to think about: how do you use those in-kind gifts? Not appropriate for every organization, but can be really meaningful for others. We also think about team volunteerism. A lot of employees here are looking for a meaningful experience. They want work to be about more than just showing up to work every day. Very common to see partnerships where whether it's helping build a home for Habitat for Humanity, for volunteering for a walk for the Humane Society, a lot of different ways for teams to participate. They use team building for their company to do that. They're also supporting a nonprofit community impact by those contribution of volunteer hours. At BWF, we actually encourage our own teammates to volunteer their community hours for their own teammates. And there is a broad range of what those volunteer engagements look like. And again, it's everywhere from just going out and sometimes being a helping hand at a walkathon to skill-based, whether they're a loaned executive doing something like accounting or other skill sets that the nonprofit may need to be successful. All opportunities to get engaged.
Wonderful. I'm going to jump in here with some of our kind of employee incentive programs that I think are absolutely a valuable aspect of corporate partnerships and corporate relationships, but we often, again, don't think about at the same time when we're thinking about like an in-kind gift type thing. So first things first, no surprise here, corporate matching gifts. If you have been on any webinar with Double the Donation, you have probably seen something like this before. But when I say matching gift, I'm talking about when a company matches the donation their employees make to an eligible nonprofit or school. And if this feels way too rudimentary, what I'll just say is you would not believe the number of conversations I have with people where about halfway through, I realize we are not talking about the same thing when we say matching gifts. So take this as maybe little lesson 0.5 of the session is just remember to be very clear with what you're talking about when you're using any of these terms, because the people we're speaking to at the companies, the individual employees themselves, they're not thinking about the fundraising and volunteering world as much as we are. All right. So some quick facts to talk about why matching gift programs are super exciting for nonprofits. First of all, 84% of surveyed donors will donate if they're match eligible. So it can be a really great way to engage some new donors or engage maybe some kind of stagnant donors who haven't given recently. The other, and maybe my favorite point to pull out here, is that 1 in 3 donors will give a larger donation than originally planned if a match is offered, with the average donation amount increasing by 51%. I don't know about you, but I can really imagine how this might happen. We're logging on, we're planning on giving $20. We're reminded that our company will match. Maybe I'll give $50. That leaves the nonprofit I'm trying to donate with $100, and I get to go about my day feeling really good. So I often think about these programs as taking advantage of the donors you already have in the door and the engagement that you already have to kind of the fullest extent by getting people to engage again with their employee incentive programs. Finally, matching gifts can lead to improved donor engagement. 71% more donors respond to fundraising appeals that mention matching that don't. So it can be, again, a great way to engage your donor base. I also wanted to throw in here volunteer grant programs. So volunteer grants, otherwise known as Dollars for Doers, is when a company matches their employees' volunteer hours to a given nonprofit. So every company does it a little bit differently, but often it'll be like if you volunteer for 10 hours, then we will match those hours with a donation kind of in your honor to the nonprofit that you volunteered with. So it's a really great way to convert the volunteer energy into into actual dollars in the door, as well as build those corporate relationships.
Yeah, Colleen, there's a great
yeah.
question. There's a great question in the
Perfect.
chat about any tips for stewarding volunteering and other non-philanthropic efforts into giving. One of the great reasons for having people do things like volunteer and show up in whether they're delivering things on behalf of a nonprofit, volunteering at a walkathon, or helping with some event, is it's a great way to expose those volunteers to storytelling. And sometimes they meet the beneficiaries, depending upon your program. But I've always said whether it's a collegiate environment, whether it's a children's hospital, or whether it's a humane society, having people experience the organization, get exposure, is a great way to motivate them into becoming donors. And make sure you make sure that opportunity is available for them to see how they can become a donor.
Absolutely. Thanks for jumping in there, Mark. And people, feel free to keep dropping things in the chat. I do also want to note that we have a poll that's gone live where we've asked you what type of corporate partnerships you kind of most often engage with. So we definitely want to hear from you all today. Much more fun when it's more of a conversation. All right. I was just quickly throwing in here that the value of a volunteer hour is estimated to be about $33.49. So that when we add in that volunteer grant revenue, that brings us up to $48.49 per hour. So again, hopefully giving you an idea as to why these programs can be super beneficial to you all. Final piece I want to call out with these employer incentive programs, though there are a ton of other ones, is paid volunteer time off. So this is when a company has a sort of PTO bucket available for their employees specifically for volunteering. This can be exceptionally helpful if you are a nonprofit that has weekday volunteer slots that are a little bit harder to fill. Reminding people that they have these programs is a great way to get those slots filled, as well as, again, to continue that engagement and continue that relationship with these corporate entities and their employees. I do want to kind of check in on that poll that I just shouted out. Again, I asked you what types of corporate partnerships that your nonprofit offers. Seems the majority of you all are thinking about in-kind giving and gala sponsorship, as well as employee giving drives and workplace team volunteer days, as well as we have a few that said other, and they're dropping it in the chat. So keep your eye out on the chat in terms of what other people are doing. All right. So we've talked a little bit about what these programs are. And again, it's comprehensive. There's a ton of different ways we can interact with these companies, but let's dig into what we're actually going to do, how we're going to actually engage with these programs, and how we're going to find these programs to engage with. So Mark, I'm going to once again pass it over to you and talk about that creating that wish list.
Yeah, one of the great gifts of a lot of development professionals is their willingness to call anybody, and that's a gift and a blessing and a skill set. But it's going to be important. I once ran a golf tournament, and we thought we were clever by sending out letters to people. And when we finally got a hold of one of the reps from one of the major golf companies, they said they got 1,000 letters a week requesting donations of golf equipment. So we ended up with golf equipment because we had a very specific ask. We created a pathway. We had a strategy around it. So when you're going to these companies, it's going to be really important to think about, what are you actually asking for? Is it realistic too? And when do you need it? Is it a realistic ask? So be prepared for those things. So really take the time and be prepared. You probably get one really good shot at having these conversations with each of these folks. So really thinking through what you're going to ask for, what you specifically need, and then be prepared to storytell from day one. Tell them something that makes them want to not say no to you. And that's going to be real important to think about, giving them a little bit of exposure. I've done a lot of work with children's hospitals over the year, and it was always like, if you could expose people to a tour, that was always very powerful. I would say that's the same with most of our missions, but share those stories as soon as possible, so it's harder to say no, or you get them to listen a little bit longer in that process. Part of that is also understanding who are your potential partners, right? There's a tendency to always think, I've seen it happen where people go and they load in the highest list of biggest companies. Find people who have a connection to you. Why should they care about you? What's their connection? and be prepared to look deep. Who walked through your door in the last, if you're a whether a hospital or whether you're a museum or a facility, who walked through your door that you may not have known? Look for those opportunities to engage people, but don't just look at the wealthiest companies. Look for the people doing business in your neighborhood and doing business in a really meaningful way. Some of the things, again, think about aligning mission and values. I mentioned children's hospitals. It's really hard to be anti-sick kid. Everybody's pro helping children to be healthy. There's lots of missions that tie directly to what people care about and do as part of their job. There's also stories that they may share as part of their messaging. But look for those existing philanthropy, or what are those different relationships that they connect. And then really look at, what is an appropriate ask? Maybe what they've given somewhere else might be a good example. So really tracking what their overall giving philosophy is. Most places, by the way, have a corporate responsibility officer. Not a bad person to do your first reach out to. They're actually paid to talk to people like us. So take advantage of it. But look for those existing connections. Giving an example, we're alumni of your institution, of your programs, board members. Do you know where they're involved, where their spouses work? And consider donors, where they might be doing matching gifts already from. And is there an opportunity to expand those programs? So lots of opportunities to think about existing connections that you can build on rather than create new ones. Think about connections. Again, what kind of employer data might you already have? If they're signing up for a museum membership, do they list their employer? And you might find out that a whole bunch of them work at a place that has a matching gift program already. We had a children's hospital that we had suggested they engage with a company that was in a nearby community, and the leadership was like, no, they're not really part of our community. Well, what we did is we took a look at who was the guarantors of their patients, and it turned out that they were treating hundreds of family members from this company every year. Changed the dynamic of the discussion with that organization. So lots of opportunity to look at who are the people that you're already touching. And so look at ways to collect employer data of your existing donors. It's a treasure trove of information.
Absolutely. I love that story, Mark, because that's something we talk about all the time here at Double the Donation, which is like, you might have unexpected pockets within a company. You have no idea that so many of your supporters work for a single company. And that could be a really great stepping stone for a broader corporate partnership. So as you said, ask people where they work. That is the simplest thing. If you have a form, be that your donation form or a volunteer registration form or anything else, where people are already going in and inputting their data, they're already planning on giving you their name and their email and maybe their credit card information, ask them for this other piece of information that could prove very valuable for you. And ideally, ask them every time they contribute, because as we know, if you are on LinkedIn, people are switching jobs all the time, and that data can go out of date really quickly. And so the absolute gold standard is getting people to self-report on this. Best practices very quickly that we see on our end with this is letting people know why you're asking where they work. Again, this is a world we live in all the time. It might seem really obvious, but other people might be a little weirded out by it. Why do you need to know where I work when I'm signing up for this volunteer opportunity? What are you going to do with that information? So putting something as simple as like, see if your company will match your donation, or see if your employer offers a volunteer incentive, whatever language you think will best explain to your supporter why you're asking, will make people more likely to fill it out. The other piece is always making it optional. We absolutely never want someone to not hit submit on the form because they were weirded out by this question. So quick things there in terms of best practices.
And Colleen, I'd encourage you to make your partners on your campus, whatever your campus looks like, also aware of why you're doing it, because sometimes they just don't bother with it. And the person checking people in, taking memberships, whatever the thing, for them to just ask that question becomes a treasure trove of information for you.
Absolutely. Getting that team buy-in. It's amazing how within a single organization, people will have no idea about these programs and what we're potentially missing out on. So any trainings you can do to get people involved is going to be huge. Amazing. Other thing I wanted to say is if you didn't get them to fill it out on the form, maybe you hadn't added it to your form in time, or they just chose not to fill it out, you can also ask people after in some sort of follow-up email, maybe post donation or post volunteer or post ticketed event if they came. Then ask people again. In an email, you'll have even a little bit more space to explain again why you're asking and give them the context. So definitely worth continuing to follow up with people. And the very final piece I want to shout out in terms of getting this data is to consider an employer append. If you really want to get a kind of broad swath of your supporter base and their employer data, it might be worth seeing if you can work with an organization to get an employer append done so that you can input the data and then receive the data back so that you have a better idea, so that you're not, again, waiting. Maybe, again, if you have a big initiative, you're not waiting for each individual to go in and provide their information. So wanted to provide that as well. All right, we've touched on this a little bit, but again, we've talked about data now for quite a bit, and Mark is in the chat saying data is king. What are we actually going to do with this data? How can we be strategic with it? And the big thing is, again, looking at where your supporters already work. What company cultures do you already resonate with? So if you can see that you have like hundreds of donations coming in from Walt Disney Company, maybe they're going to be a worthwhile company to reach out to regarding your gala or whatever sort of corporate partnerships you're trying to formulate at a given time. And then it also, maybe you have a company in mind that you really, really want to reach out to and your cold outreach hasn't been working. Can you look at who in your supporter base actually does work there, and would they be open to making an introduction if you give them a template? So again, really great for opening those doors. All right, so we've identified the companies. Let's talk about actually making the requests for support. Mark?
Yeah, so one of the things is to really think about what are all the different opportunities that are really afforded to you and are again appropriate to you, can be a meaningful experience. So everything from what are the things that really offer value? Because I would say if they don't offer value to you and they don't offer value to the donor, then you're not going to have a sustained relationship. And as part of our work, we always want you to build capacity. We always want you to, rarely are you ever asked to raise less money than you were the year before. So we always want to be building relationships. So really thinking about all the different ways that you can engage, and then really what are the most appropriate. So you might sit down and really begin that conversation about, while you have this big menu available to you, listen to what a company is hoping to achieve. What's important in an organization. But I would go in there with a plan of, here's the 2 or 3 things I think most likely to be an opportunity for this organization to connect with. And think about personalizing to the company. Make the case for why. You said that you really wanted to have your organization seen in the community. Great. We have an event that we need sponsors for. It'd be a great way for your company X, Y, or Z to really come aboard and be seen in the community as supporting their local community. Sharing what happens in the past. We're in an era where we have job turnover in America of about 3 years or less. That the person I'm thinking of, actually, I'm here in Minneapolis, one of the large nonprofits here in town, or I should say for-profits, has they rotate their corporate community officer every so often. So that person may not always remember or know what was done 2 or 3 years ago. So circling back and saying, hey, we really appreciated this. As a result of your gift, this thing was allowed to happen. Highlight the different levels of engagement and be prepared to ask for a specific gift. Those are all things that create opportunities for you to think about what might be valuable. Some of the things, again, sponsorship. At some level, companies support things because they want to be visible. So what's the right level of sponsorship, and is the right level of connection available to them for that sponsorship level? Again, we mentioned in-kind. In-kind's a great way. Again, make sure there are things that you can use. But volunteering is the deepest thing because it makes them show up over and over again. And you're likely, by the way, the more volunteer hours you get, the more likely you are to have them also make additional gifts. not uncommon at all to see a matching gift program, an annual giving program come alongside a strong volunteer program.
All right. Before I dig into encouraging companies to launch programs, I want to quickly shout out another poll that's gone live where we asked, how easy is it for your team to craft a compelling appeal to a corporate partner today? So you can give us a little bit of an idea of where you're coming to this conversation from. And then the other thing is, I mentioned in the chat, this is the time to submit your questions. Again, we are going to do an official kind of Q&A portion in a few minutes. And the absolute best place to put them is in the Q&A tab. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, but the Q&A tab will allow us to see kind of all the questions all together. So if there's a topic we haven't covered or you have a follow-up question we haven't addressed, feel free to drop it in that questions tab and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. And in the meantime, I want to talk a little bit about encouraging companies to launch those incentive programs that I talked about earlier. Hopefully you have these relationships with these companies and you've already gotten everything you want from them in terms of in-kind gifts, and they're sponsoring all your events and they're having volunteering days, but they're ready to do more. Or maybe they're not prepared for those things. Maybe they're not prepared to do a really big monetary gift today, but they are interested in some way in engaging with you. They maybe want a little bit more of a set it and forget it model. They're not prepared to put in a ton of team hours now, something like that. There is space to build a sort of long-term relationship with these employee incentive programs. So when it comes to encouraging people to launch them, the big thing is explaining to companies why they are valuable. We have a lot of really cool data about why these programs are helpful to companies, including that 77% of consumers aim to support socially responsible companies. 93% of employees believe companies must lead with purpose. 88% of individuals would like to know about a company's CSR efforts, and 92% would buy a product that support a good cause. So companies engaging in initiatives, having programs that they can point to is in their best interest, but often people don't have time. They don't know how it works. They don't know how to figure it out. So particularly for those maybe like mid-size, maybe more local companies, it could be worth you helping them through that process, you encouraging them to set up one of these programs, and then you can engage the individual employees in participating in them. So another thing you can do, we see time and time again that is useful, is highlighting similar businesses with programs. So here I have that Coca-Cola has a 2-to-1 employer match. Cisco does 80 volunteer hours per year in terms of volunteer time off. Microsoft has a $25 per volunteer hour program for volunteer grants. Obviously, these are big, major kind of nationwide companies, but you can again look at maybe more regional companies, people with similar missions to the company that you're trying to target, to encourage people to launch one of these programs too, so that they don't get left behind. Final piece of this is sharing resources to make it easier for them to set up. Again, here at Double the Donation, we have a number of resources about like how to start a matching gift program that makes it super easy for a company, no matter their size, to get set up with these programs. You can do that little bit of legwork of research at the beginning, makes it a much easier yes for the company that you're trying to target. So definitely happy to share some of these resources after with people. Feel free to reach out as you're trying to encourage companies to launch these programs. All right. I would say final piece, but I might have one more. I can't remember, but I also want to talk about encouraging companies to launch programs by getting an employee to advocate. Again, going with that thing that cold outreach can be difficult. Maybe you have a supporter that's super duper excited and they want to get involved in as many ways as they can. They've already donated a lot and they volunteer a lot, but they're still looking for more ways to get involved. See if they are up for sending a little introduction letter where they can advocate, saying, we're really hoping that the company will launch a matching gift program or a payroll giving program, or whatever program might be of best interest to that supporter, can help get that conversation going. Here's my final one. I knew I had one more, and that is establishing a strategy for inbound partnership prospects. I have a little bit of a thought exercise I often talk about with people on discussion groups, but like imagine a world where a company has a poor intern that is tasked with finding a corporate opportunity, maybe a volunteering opportunity or a sponsorship opportunity or some sort of giving opportunity, and they don't know where to turn. If they end up on your website, you want them to know that they should work with you and that programs exist and this is what that they could do, so that they don't come to you with some wild appeal that is not in any way physically possible, but instead they're reaching out with like the example here being like, hey, I want to learn more about the adoption event sponsorship, something that you are actually looking for. So making sure you have a place on your website where you're really clear that you are open to corporate partnerships and what exactly you are hoping to get from corporate teams.
Yeah, and inbound is the holy grail. So if you get inbound offers, that's off a great deal. But I would also add, don't also think about the approach here. That the suggestion Colleen just made about utilizing an employee to advocate for you or a board member. Think about your easiest way in the front door. I would tell you that there's a tendency for people to look for a foundation. Sometimes the foundations have money, sometimes they don't. But is it a corporate foundation? I've seen gifts come out of the marketing department. I've seen gifts come out of the legal department. By the way, when I worked at a law school, a place made a gift out of the legal department. There's corporate responsibility office. There's all sorts of ways in the door. So don't get yourself in a narrow box. Think about your best way to engage this organization.
Great point. All right, we have one final piece before we're getting to that Q&A, and that is talking about maintaining and growing corporate partnerships. If you've worked really hard to build this relationship, we want to make sure it can go on year after year. So once again, Mark, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. Well, stewardship is critically important, right? Retention of donors, not just individuals, but corporate, is mission critical. We have a declining donor count at most organizations in America. I'm excited about the work we've been doing as a team to help change that. But it's important to make sure we acknowledge and provide that value back. Again, corporate partners are great donors, but they do it for a reason. They do it to create visibility and engage the community, make sure they feel that engagement. So provide impacts. What happened? Tell them a story that says we cannot not fund this next year. We have to do it again. Really celebrate those corporate partners appropriately at the right level. I once knew somebody who did a golf tournament for all the people who did golf tournaments for them, which always cracks me up. But look for ways to say thank you. This is still a people business. So say thank you to the individuals too that helped you build that partnership. Really make sure you have a process for feedback about what was successful. If you had volunteers, for example, to walkathon, reach out to them, get feedback from those people when they said, oh, this was a meaningful experience, and parrot it back to the organization so they hear those stories. Make them feel that they would be letting their employees down to not be a partner with you next year. Again, really think about, what's the data that can give you the updates about how you're engaging them, their team. Hey, how many of their employees were donors this past year? Share all that information so you're creating a partner with that corporation and the right individuals. And by the way, I have seen some folks be amazing partners and other people are slightly disengaged. So if you're not being engaged properly by someone within a company you think you should have a partnership with, work hard to find another partner within that company so you have multiple options in the organization. Think about building a program that leads you somewhere. Think about that recognition that's scaled appropriately. So if someone's your best corporate partner, make sure they realize they're your best corporate partner and they're recognized appropriately, and that the level of return on their investment, so to speak, is the same, is appropriate to that. And make sure it's sustainable, right? That if this program lasted 5 years, can you actually sustain it? Sometimes people offer benefits, not thinking through what a benefit for a gift might look like in 5 years. Make sure the program's sustainable and can renew and build long-term support for the organization in that process.
All right. My final pieces here before we open up for the Q&A is to talk about engaging employees in these employee incentive programs, because not only is that valuable to you, because again, we've talked about the matching gift dollars and the volunteering grant dollars and stuff like that, but for those corporate partnerships and maintaining those relationships, it is amazing to be able to go to them and talk about like the hundreds of employees that are giving via their employer match program to your organization or giving their volunteer hours, and having that data. And then particularly if you helped encourage them to set it up, showing that their employees are actually using the programs, hugely valuable. So when it comes to engaging employees, it is a challenge because just having the programs exist is actually not enough. We have the best data here on matching gifts, where we see that 26 million plus individuals in the US, or 10% of the US workforce, are eligible. Another way of thinking about that is 40% of Fortune 500 companies offer matching gift programs. And yet 78% of eligible donors are unaware of their eligibility or how to go about the process, because 81% of companies don't include adequate information on matching gifts in accessible places. So we can't just rely on employees figuring out that these programs exist, but we have to encourage them to participate. So I want to throw in some quick things. And the reason why, again, I'm hitting this kind of hard right here at the very end in the 11th hour, is because $4 to $7 billion in matching gift funds alone goes unclaimed annually. So there are a ton of dollars out there that nonprofits could be accessing if we engage the employees in these programs. All right. When it comes to how to best do that, the first thing is letting people know what exactly they're supposed to do, giving them a step 1 and a step 2, and making that as personalized as you possibly can. So saying, hey, if you work at Microsoft, you need to click here and your $100 gift will be eligible, will be matched, is much easier than saying, go to HR, like figure it out yourself. So giving people next steps to empower submission and following up with people. People need reminders to check their eligibility, reminders to submit their gift, and also thank yous for getting their gift submitted, for taking more action. And what we see is, I'm jumping ahead. What we see is we feel like we're being annoying with that. We feel like, oh, we've already sent 2. Do we need to send that 3rd? But again, the data really supports that people appreciate those reminders, because people do submit after that 2nd reminder, after that 3rd reminder. People's lives are busy. Again, they're not, unfortunately, thinking about us as much as maybe we are thinking about them. So giving them the opportunity to take advantage of these programs that they have. These are employee benefits that they're receiving and that maybe enticed them into this job in the first place. They appreciate a reminder to actually take advantage of them. All right. Up next, we're going to craft maybe some company-specific appeals. Maybe we know that a particular company is having a giving day where instead of doing a 2-to-1 match, they're doing a 3-to-1 match. We want to be able to be the person that reminds our donors that this is happening and that they could donate to our cause or volunteer for a cause, whatever the program may be, because again, we have this information and we're sending out the reminders instead of letting the companies kind of do or do not send the reminders. Finally, we're going to do some company announcements. We're going to give templates to the companies if they have these programs that they can send out to their employees, reminding them that they exist. Again, I always feel like people are 10 times more likely to do something you've asked them to do if you give them a template. So giving them a reminder they can send out, and then also maybe giving them a post that they can reshare on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on wherever you think is most relevant for their community. Maybe you can make a post talking about how much you love this corporate partner and that they have this program. Make it really easy for them to reshare with their community and start getting that benefit again, that they have one of these programs and that it's something that they can show off. So that was a very quick speed run through that, but I wanted to bring us over to some of those questions. Mark, I know you had a stay tuned in the chat to talk about opportunities outside of corporate grants and funding. Can I get you to talk more on that?
Yeah, there was as I mentioned, there's lots of avenues in the doorway to organizations. So it's really think about alignment first, and then think about engagement. What are the places most likely to care about you? And there's lots of different ways, and there's lots of ways to open those doors. Some of the things to think about is what's realistic. The cause related marketing, I think, offers itself to a very narrow band of organizations, because it's a long-term commitment for an organization to make a commitment to an individual nonprofit. Are there some federated examples? Things like Children's Miracle Network and similar things where they've where they'll make a gift at Costco. You make a gift at Costco, and it supports the local children's hospital. Right? Those have been great. But think about what are the realistic ways for you to get your foot in the door. And that first thing might be sponsorship. It might be a donation of time. But think about what is that relationship building piece to get the relationship started, the stewardship. And then you can think about those bigger cause related marketing challenges and how do we get in the door for a much bigger conversation. And I would say those are missed opportunities by nonprofits because they tend to stop at the transactional piece. And there's a lot of big opportunities available to really build bigger relationship connections.
Absolutely. We also had a question coming in about recognition. And I was wondering, have you seen any really like creative or particularly powerful and like enticing ways for companies that nonprofits can provide recognition for the activities that the companies are engaging with?
Yeah. Well, the first and foremost is, again, we have a few children's hospitals on here today. Children's hospitals have been the one real recipient of named opportunities, right? A lot of companies are, there's an opportunity to put their name on things. They want visibility, bringing experiences to the workplace. I've seen places like zoos and other things sometimes bring animals to the work environment for exposure. It creates a very positive employee experience. Other places have looked at, again, a certain level of recognition at an event. What's the value of that? There was a question about, how do you appropriately price the value of some things. Companies want to know that they were mentioned, and really looking for the right spot to be mentioned or visible, and to be mentioned in a spot where it gives a positive impression. That's worth a lot to a company. And the more you can do to foster that good feeling, that's beneficial to the organization. And again, experiences matter a lot. And that's why stewardship matters, is to make sure once a donor engages with you, make it hard for them to disengage.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think recognition there's so many like creative ways that you can do it, also in attaching it to your particular mission and your organization. So I would also really encourage people to ask questions of your peers. We run a discussion group series all about corporate partnerships and stuff like that. And people are always bringing ideas and passing ideas to each other because there might be something that has never kind of occurred to you before. All right, we asked in that poll again how easy it is for your team, and 45% of you have said that when it comes to corporate partnerships, you have an approach, but it is time consuming. So Mark, not to put you on the spot here, but I was wondering, do you have any advice for making it more efficient, any of the things that we've been talking about today, making it take up a little bit less time?
Yeah. Part of it is, again, maintaining your data appropriately. Everything's easier if you have a common source to grab information from and to grab it quickly. Think about what one of the things I think as an industry, as a fundraising industry, we have a tendency to be very tactical. And taking a step back to sit down and really do a thought session and say, what should our corporate strategy be? What's the right partners for us? What do we offer? Some larger nonprofits do almost have a menu that they have available to them when they go sit down in a conversation. That might not be available to everybody to be able to do that sort of thing, but to say, what's our strategy and where are we going to spend time and energy? You may also find, by the way, cold calling is the hardest thing any of us do. So as we mentioned, ways to save time. Make sure you have good data so you're working off that. You also have data sitting in relationships. So who in your organization has outside contacts? And sitting down with them and building a partnership. Talking to your board members. Anybody who can make a warm conversation for you makes everything move faster. And it takes work, but it again, if you have a strategy that guides that, it's a lot more efficient because you're not deciding it as you go. You're going based on what you've decided is the best opportunity for success.
Mm-hmm. All right. Unfortunately, I have to have us wrap up because we are in our final minute. But Mark, huge thank you for participating today. And I do want to
Thank you.
encourage everyone to connect with Mark on LinkedIn. Keep the conversation going. Feel free to also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer more questions or send over resources that we have accessible. And then I also want to direct people to some other resources that we have. The big one that I want to focus on is what's in that blue box in the middle of the screen right now, which is our upcoming free virtual summit on workplace fundraising and volunteering that's happening October 29th and 30th. This is a completely free and virtual event designed to allow you to hear directly from other nonprofit professionals what they are doing to raise more through workplace avenues, through corporate sponsorships, employer matching gifts, the whole 9 yards. And I will also say that if you can't join us live October 29th and 30th, the majority of those sessions are being recorded and will be accessible to registrants after. So even if you can't join live, I encourage you to register anyway. Also, if you are interested in speaking with the Double the Donation team specifically about your organization, maybe you had a kind of more personal question that you didn't want to throw into the chat today, feel free to schedule some time with our team with that green box on the left. And the final thing is to sign up for our Matching Gift Academy. If you're looking for some training resources about matching gifts and how to get involved with them, that is a resource that we have a free access code with 2x donations. All right, that is it for me. Mark, again, a huge thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing with our community. Any final parting words before we hop off today?
Thank you all for what you do for your communities and for your nonprofits. This is hard work and it's important. So thank you all.
So perfect. All right, with that, we will wrap up. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Great.